Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're modifying the suspension so we can fit the coilovers and the EJ spindles on the BRAT. So just want to go over a little bit what we're doing here. The factory BRAT lower control arm in the front, which mounts like this, has a radius arm going this way. This would be the driver's side front, if you will. And so the ball joint, like I've explained earlier, on the EJ spindle would not fit into the factory control arm because it has a 7-degree ball joint dimension, I guess, if you will, and the EJ has a 10-degree. And so I've gone out and I bought me a 10-degree reamer, if you will, from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description, and I reamed this out to a 10-degree, which will allow us to fit the EJ spindles and everything, which is going to make all this work. So that went pretty smoothly. One other thing I want to talk about, this is a Gen 2 control arm. The factory BRAT one, I can't get off the car right now, but the factory BRAT one from a Gen 1 will not work because it has a bolt-in ball joint. And so this allows us to bolt this way, which is spindle bolt here, and then coil over everything from that point on. And so I just wanted to go over that with you. This is real simple to do. I'm sure you can do it with a hand drill. I'm fortunate to have a little bitty old drill press here, and so I was able to mount this on here as you saw in the video and ream that out. And so cool little modification. Good thing is I'm not tearing up the Gen 1 control arms at all. I can get to keep those, and so just moving one step further. Alright, so we finally got this loose. I'm going to take the bolts off up top, and then should be able to pull out this whole assembly. Oh. It's probably not the way to pull that off, but don't do what I do. All right, so just put this on. As you can tell, they got the slots for this. This area right here is a little snug. I did it to the dimensions of the other top hat. But I did right in here, add 2 millimeters. I think that'll give us enough tolerance. This plastic has a little play in it, and obviously the aluminum piece won't. And also these slots, I mean, I might add a millimeter to those. They're a little snug. And like I said, when the metal and the aluminum comes, obviously there won't be a lot of play with that, and I don't want to have to adjust that. But anyways, so let's go put this on the BRAT. Hold it in there. All right, we got that up in there. Hopefully you can see how that fits up in there. There's the light coming through, just the slot top hat. Obviously a little loose. This is just PLA plastic. But up here you can tell that it does fit nicely. It does cover the whole area. Basically, all I did was copied the dimension of the top hat that came with the coilovers, and then I measured the centers of each bolt and added that. So that looks like a win to me. Centered pretty nicely there, perfectly actually. I do think I need to add a little bit here on those, and maybe add just a little bit to those slots just to widen them up a little bit in Fusion 360. But overall, we've got the coilover mounted. So next up is we've got to get this control arm off, get the, I think they call that like a radial arm. This is the sway bar. Get the radial arm disconnected, get this CV axle out. We can use the the original tie rod, which is completely destroyed, so we'll probably order one of those. But we'll get all this out of here, then we can add in the Gen 2 control arm, which will have the appropriate ball joint. This one had a bolt-in ball joint, and the Gen 2 has the, oh, lack of a better word, the hole here to accept a male ball joint, whereas this one had the male ball joint going into the spindle. And the Impreza ones, which I'll show you over here in a minute, the ball joint goes down, and so we've got to replace that, and we'll have to adapt the radial arm. But overall, coilover's in, so it's a good milestone. So what I wanted to show you guys here is the spindle on the Legacy Impreza EJ chassis, if you will, is the ball joint faces down, whereas on the BRAT it faces into the spindle. And so this ball joint will go into here, and then this part will go into the lower control arm, which I'll show you. Just to further drive this point home, in case none of that made any sense, this is the ball joint from the Gen 1 BRAT. So, all right guys, really excited. Got the top hat back from Sing Cut Send. If you remember, I designed up a top hat to mount an Impreza coilover to the BRAT by taking the 2-bolt BRAT configuration and adapting it to the top plate, which here's the final version. Aluminum, 8 mil thick, threaded, so we can add bolts, so you can bolt it essentially into the car, and there's no modification needed to the BRAT body at all. So common thing to do is to take the 3-bolt and just drill an extra hole and adapt it that way. This seems to be a lot easier and a lot cleaner. And honestly, if you know how to do this stuff, you don't need the 3D printer. That's just added benefit. And the 3D printer I have is, it's like $175 special off Amazon. It's the Ender 3 V2 Neo. I'll put that in the description as well. So once you kind of get it down and you learn Fusion 360, which is pretty easy and it's free, you can make stuff like this. But if you don't have that and you're just good at Fusion 360, you can send the file to Sing Cut Send. These are $27 a piece, cut out and shipped. Took like a week. Not bad at all. And so it works, got it all designed up. You could get these anodized or powder coated if you wanted. I'm just gonna leave them aluminum looking color because you're really not gonna see them. But that has allowed us to bolt in the Impreza coilover. Then we took the suspension, or really the spindle if you will, and the hub from the Impreza / Legacy that we robbed these off of, and then we adapted the Gen 2 lower control arm to accept the EJ ball joint. And so there it is. This is just a rough version. It's not really even bolted in. Still got the old BRAT CV axle in here and the old emergency brake, but this is the ideal situation that we need. So here's the top plate bolted into the BRAT. Like I said, using still the factory mounting locations in the Impreza coilover. And then here it is, all set up inside the wheel well. So the next order of business is the rear. Now this is a little tricky. On the Gen 2 BRAT, I think it's pretty straightforward. They use the existing trailing arm, all that. You take the EJ brakes and you buy the Subaru kit, which is a guy from Australia. I believe his name is Dave. He's designed a full kit for the rear of this, and it's great, and it would work. There's not a lot of R&D, if you will, on the Gen 1. I reached out to Dave, great guy. He just said, look, there's not a lot of R&D on the Gen 1. We didn't get a lot of them over there, and you know, I can't say my kit's gonna work or not. And so I didn't want to spend the money on the kit. It's a great kit. I have nothing bad to say about it. It looks like it probably would work, but there's a lot of hurdles with the Gen 2. First of all, the rear of this control arm curves out towards the wheel. That prevents us from adding, or really, should I say, mating the backing plate of the EJ directly onto the trailing arm. If we could do that, essentially it's the same as the Gen 2. Some guys will cut off the end of that little tail that points out to the wheel. I didn't want to cut anything. I want to keep this original. I want to be able to reverse all this if I want to restore this car in the future, or if somebody else does. And so what I've designed with my dad is a spacer. It spaces out this backing plate about 20 millimeters. This is the passenger side backing plate, but just for reference, the caliper would be up here, not down here. But this spacer allows us to get by the little tail that sticks out, and it allows us to adapt the backing plate to the BRAT. The next order of business is the hub. Now, a lot of people will try to find XT6 rear hubs. They're pretty rare these days, and the guys that have them obviously don't want to get rid of them. I don't blame them. And there's been a few people in the past who have made their own hubs, ordered them from China, the Philippines, and all that, and done bulk orders. They're not doing that anymore. The oldest thread I could find was years ago, almost 10 years ago. And so what I did is I took the profile of an XT6 hub, which I actually found online, and I made it adapt to the BRAT. So essentially, with the rotor and everything on the caliper, it all works. So what I did is I took the XT6 hub and I just extended it 20 millimeters, because the profile now of the backing plate is 20 millimeters towards the outside of the car. And so this, once made, will accomplish the same thing as the front. And so we'll have 5 lug in the back. So 3D printed up this hub. We've test fitted everything. Now we've got the metal. My dad's gonna make this for me, mill it down and everything on a lathe and do what he does best. And then we'll have the 5 lug conversion in the back. That is the idea in theory. I hope that makes sense. So we need to move on to getting this CV axle out of the BRAT. Well guys, we got the CV axle out of the front and the lower control arm. Next week, we're gonna work on the 5 lug conversion in the rear, show you a few custom parts, and then we'll move on from there. Thanks for hanging out with me. Stay tuned.